There's a vibrant downtown neighborhood in Toronto full of cafes, bars, and tight-knit community spirit. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and where a missing person doesn't go unnoticed for long. But from 2010 to 2020, men started vanishing. It began slowly, a face on a poster, a name in a Facebook post, a police bulletin asking for leads. At first, people thought these were isolated incidents. People move, disappear for personal reasons, right? But in this case, the disappearances had an eerie similarity. Similar backgrounds, all gone without a trace. And in the background of it all, there was a man most people barely noticed. Someone who blended in, someone who was always seen smiling, and even volunteered in the same community that was now gripped by fear. In 2010, a man named Skandarish Navaratnam vanished. He was last seen leaving a bar late at night. Police had nothing solid to go on. No body, no crime scene, no witnesses. His friends were worried, but without evidence of foul play, the trail went cold. In 2012, it happened again. Another man, Abdul Fiazi, disappeared. Then just months later, a third, Mahid Kayan. All three were well known in the neighborhood. All three had a loose connection to each other. And all three had some link to one particular man, Bruce MacArthur. Still, there was no physical evidence tying anyone to the disappearances. It was a mystery, and a frustrating one. Bruce MacArthur was, on the surface, unremarkable. He was a self-employed landscaper, in his 60s with a quiet life. He had a roster of clients, most of them in the same area where the disappearances occurred. He kept plants healthy, lawns trimmed, and small talk friendly. He wasn't a shadowy figure lurking in alleys. He was the kind of guy people waved to from their porch. But beneath that mild-mannered exterior, he was hiding something terrible. For years, the disappearances continued sporadically. In 2015, Sarush Mahmoodi. In 2016, it was Karishna Karatnam, a newcomer to Toronto who hadn't even lived in the neighborhood long enough to build deep roots. By 2017, 2 more men had vanished. Salim Hassan in April and Andrew Kinsman in June. Kinsman's disappearance was the turning point. Kinsman was well-liked and deeply involved in the local community. When he didn't show up for Pride events and failed to water his plants, something his friends knew he'd never neglect. Alarm bells went off. His friends were certain something bad had happened. Police launched a task force called Project Prism to investigate the string of disappearances. At first, they faced the same frustrating dead ends, until they looked at security camera footage from outside Kinsman's apartment building. On the day Kinsman vanished, a camera caught him getting into a gray Dodge Caravan. The van was traced back to Bruce MacArthur. When detectives started digging, they realized MacArthur's name had popped up in earlier investigations, but always in small ways, never enough to build a case. Now, the connections between him and multiple missing men were becoming impossible to ignore. They also found that MacArthur's landscaping business gave him access to dozens of properties, and crucially, access to private yards, gardens, and planters. As the investigation closed in, police prepared to act. It was January 18th, 2018, a cold, quiet day in Toronto. Inside Bruce MacArthur's apartment, a man lay bound and helpless on the bed. MacArthur moved with a disturbing calm, unaware that the law was about to catch up to him. Then, faintly at first, came the sound. Boots, multiple pairs, fast, moving down the hall. MacArthur paused, tilting his head towards the door. He didn't rush to answer. The footsteps stopped directly outside. A sharp knock, then a commanding voice cut through the stillness. "Toronto Police, open the door!" MacArthur didn't move. "Toronto Police, open the door!" Seconds later, the door exploded inward. Officers in tactical gear poured into the apartment in a blur of black, their voices urgent and authoritative. "Hands where I can see them, now!" One officer went straight for the man on the bed, a utility knife flashing as the ropes were sliced away. Another pair of officers forced MacArthur face down onto the floor, his wrists cuffed behind him in a fluid motion. The man on the bed blinked hard against the sudden flood of movement, taking in the sight of his captor, the man he had trusted to meet, now restrained and silent on the floor. Outside, the hall echoed with radio chatter. Inside, the reality settled in. They had just stopped Bruce MacArthur in the act. The mild-mannered landscaper had been a serial killer operating in plain sight for years. His victims were Skandaraj Navaratnam, Abdul Fiazi, Mahid Khan, Sarush Mahmoodi, Harushna Karagatnam, Salim Hassan, Andrew Kinsman, and Dean Lezowick. Each man had been targeted, murdered, and hidden in the gardens of his clients' homes. Bruce MacArthur pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. The case left deep scars in Toronto. It sparked a public conversation about how missing persons cases are investigated, and how certain victims, particularly from marginalized groups, can be overlooked for too long. Today, those who knew the victims work to keep their memories alive.